At the bar, a homeless girl walked up to me and said, "Could you set that drink down and call an ambulance?" The words were so simple, so urgent. Can you put that drink down and call an ambulance? I never imagined those innocent pleas would lead to a needle plunging into my arm, a complete blackout, and my girlfriend facing down a nightmare in our own home. I was just enjoying a beer at the bar when she approached. She looked so young, maybe 19, with matted brown hair and clothes that had seen far too many days. Her eyes, wide and seemingly desperate, locked onto mine as she whispered, "Can you put that drink down and call an ambulance?" My first, gut reaction, fueled by a few too many drinks but still genuine, was instant concern. Someone needed help. And that's what you do, right? You help. Or at least, that's what I desperately wanted to believe. She practically yanked me towards the exit, her voice a frantic stream about a friend overdosing in an abandoned building just around the corner. My mind, fuzzy from the alcohol, still recognized the urgency. I fumbled for my phone, starting to dial 911 as we walked, but the operator needed a precise location. The girl just kept pulling, urging me to hurry. We veered into a dark alley between two towering warehouses. A prickle of unease started to climb my spine, but I shoved it down. Someone's life was on the line. I couldn't afford to be paranoid right now. The building she finally stopped at was a decaying husk, clearly abandoned for years. Boards covered most of the windows, every surface screamed with graffiti. She squeezed through a gap in the plywood where a loading dock used to be, and I followed, my phone signal flickering to one bar, then none. Inside, the air hung heavy with the stench of mold and stale piss. Our footsteps echoed hollowly until she produced a small flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the gloom. It illuminated a chaotic scene, old furniture, trash, scattered needles. This was it. Exactly the kind of place a desperate overdose might happen. "Up here," she urged, pointing the light at a staircase so rickety it looked like it could crumble any second. That's when it hit me. Like a punch to the gut. The alcohol haze evaporated, replaced by stark, cold clarity. We were utterly alone. In a derelict building. No cries for help. No desperate gasps. Just silence. Every true crime podcast I'd ever binged screamed in my head, "This is how it starts." I stopped dead at the foot of those crumbling stairs. "I'll wait here," I insisted, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll direct the paramedics when they arrive." But she grabbed my wrist again, her surprisingly strong fingers tightening. "He's too heavy. He's turning blue," she cried, her voice still laced with that fake panic. My 911 call kept cutting out, one bar, then nothing. I stared at her face in the flickering beam, desperately searching for a lie. My instinct screamed danger, but the terrifying thought of someone dying, someone I could save, clouded everything. Just one step, I told myself. Just confirm. Then I'd get out. At the top, a long, dark hallway stretched before us, doors hanging precariously or completely missing. She steered me to one at the very end. Every single cell in my body screamed wrong. But that chilling, persistent question echoed, what if someone is dying? As I hesitated, peering into the even darker room she indicated, straining to see or hear any sign of distress, I felt it. A sharp, searing pain in my upper arm. Like a bee sting, but 1,000 times worse. I spun, my eyes wide with shock, to see her pulling a syringe away from my arm. "What did you?" The words were already slurring, heavy and thick on my tongue. My legs buckled, turning to rubber beneath me. My phone clattered to the filthy ground, a final, metallic echo in the silence. She just watched me, those same wide eyes now devoid of panic, replaced by something utterly cold and calculating. I tried to lash out, to grab her, but my arms wouldn't obey. They felt like lead. The last thing I remember was the brutal impact of the ground, the metallic taste of dirt and rust in my mouth, and the unsettling sight of her hands, with practiced, chilling efficiency, rummaging through my pockets. Then, darkness. Absolute, terrifying oblivion. I woke up to blinding sunlight stabbing through my eyelids. My head throbbed like someone had used it for batting practice. Every muscle screamed in protest, and my mouth tasted like I'd licked a graveyard. It took a full minute for the horrifying realization to sink in. I was naked. Completely naked, lying on a filthy mattress in that exact same abandoned room. My clothes, my wallet, my keys, all gone. But my phone, inexplicably, lay just out of reach on the floor. Why would she leave that? I crawled towards it, my body aching, my mind screaming. The screen glowed with missed calls and texts, mostly from Kenna, my girlfriend, growing increasingly worried. But the most recent one made my blood run cold. "Honey, why is there a girl at our front door?" My hands trembled so violently I could barely unlock the phone, fumbling to call her back, to scream at her not to open the door. Another text blinked onto the screen, this time a photo. The girl from last night. Standing on our porch. Same matted hair, same wide eyes, but now she was wearing my clothes, holding my keys. Kenna's next message was just 3 words that sent a sickening wave of dread through me. I let her in. My fingers fumbled again, desperate to dial Kenna's number. The screen kept sliding under my shaking thumb. Finally, it rang. The sound seemed to stretch into an eternity. Then she picked up. But all I heard was pure, unadulterated screaming. Not words. Just terror. Something crashed in the background. Glass shattering. Then, silence. The line went dead. I tried calling back, but it went straight to voicemail. My whole body was shaking now, from the cold, from the fear, from whatever poison that girl had shot into me. Get help. Get to Kenna. With numb fingers, I dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. "Please help," I choked out, my voice rough and cracked. "My girlfriend is in danger at our apartment." Her voice was calm but urgent. "Sir, we already have units responding to that address. Multiple neighbors called about a disturbance. Can you tell me your location?" I looked around the filthy, desolate room, my brain struggling to process. I'm in an abandoned building. I was drugged. The girl who did it is at my apartment with my girlfriend. The operator started asking more questions, but I couldn't focus. My teeth were chattering so hard I could barely speak. Still naked and freezing on that disgusting mattress, I knew I had to get out. Had to get to Kenna. I crawled off the mattress, shards of broken glass digging into my knees as I searched the room for anything to cover myself. Old newspapers crumbled to dust. Finally, under a pile of trash, I found a blue top. Moldy and stiff, but better than nothing. I shook it out, sending clouds of dust and God knows what else flying, then wrapped it around my waist like the world's worst toga. The plastic was cold and clung to my skin. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled towards the door, using the wall to stay upright. The hallway stretched out forever, each step like wading through mud. I made it to the stairs, almost tumbling headfirst down them, grabbing the groaning railing with one hand, holding the slipping top with the other. One agonizing step at a time, I made it down to the ground floor. The loading dock entrance was a blinding rectangle of daylight that hurt my eyes. I pushed through into the alley. The concrete was freezing under my bare feet, sharp bits of gravel digging into my soles. I shuffled towards the street, clinging to the wall for support, surely looking like a madman, a naked guy wrapped in a plastic top, emerging from a derelict building. Then, a siren. Louder, closer. An ambulance screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. A paramedic jumped out, running towards me. "Sir, are you okay? We got a call about a possible overdose." He grabbed my arm to steady me. "Not overdose," I slurred, the words jumbled. "Was drugged. Girl with brown hair. She's at my apartment." He helped me towards the ambulance, radioing for police backup. The back of the ambulance was gloriously warm and bright. He wrapped a real blanket around me and began checking my pulse. "What's your name, sir?" I had to think for a second before telling him. He shined a light in my eyes. "Do you know what you were given?" I shook my head. "Needle in my arm. Woke up like this." He nodded, efficient and calm. "We're taking you to the hospital. Police will meet us there." The ride was a blur of medical questions and vital signs. At the emergency room, they wheeled me straight back. Nurse Conrad was gentle as he helped me onto a bed, taking my temperature and blood pressure. "We need to do a full tox screen to see what's in your system," he explained, as he drew blood. The needle going in made me flinch, an involuntary memory of the girl's syringe. He labeled the vials carefully. "The doctor will be in soon, but you're stable. Try to rest." But I couldn't. My eyes kept darting to my phone, desperate for news about Kenna. 20 minutes passed like hours. Then Officer Pina walked in, her face serious, her notebook in hand. "I'm Officer Pina. First thing, your girlfriend is safe. She's shaken up, but not hurt. We're bringing her here now." The relief that washed over me was so potent, so overwhelming, it almost buckled my knees. Kenna was safe. Shaken, yes, but safe. By the way, If you're still with me, riding this roller coaster of a story, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable true stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them. The girl, I stammered. Did you catch her? Officer Pina shook her head. She fled when she heard our sirens, but we have good descriptions from neighbors. She pulled up a chair. Can you tell me what happened? I started from the beginning, the bar, the fake overdose, following her, the needle, waking up naked. She wrote everything down, asking careful questions. This matches other cases we've been tracking, she said gravely. You're lucky you got out. Before she could say more, Kenna burst through the curtain, her face red and puffy from crying. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. She grabbed my hand, squeezing tight. I thought it was you in different clothes. She had your keys. I pulled her close, not caring about the top, the blanket, or how I must smell. Not your fault. She tricked us both. Kenna was shaking as she recounted what happened. She went straight to the bedroom, started pulling out drawers, throwing things around. I asked what was wrong, and she just kept searching. Then the neighbor started banging on the door about the noise, and she ran. Officer Pina took notes while Kenna talked. The doctor came in with the test results. Your blood work shows a heavy dose of benzodiazepines, probably Rohypnol or something similar, he explained, scrolling on his tablet, mixed with something else we can't identify yet. You're very lucky. This combination could have stopped your breathing. He said I'd need to stay for observation but would recover fully. Then, Detective Rivera arrived, an older guy with grey hair and tired eyes. This is the fourth case like this in 2 months, he said, pulling up another chair, showing us photos on his phone. Same pattern every time. Young woman claims someone's overdosing, leads the victim to an isolated location, drugs them and robs them, then uses their keys and ID to hit their homes. He asked detailed questions about the girl's appearance. We think she's working with others. Someone has to be fencing the stolen goods. He looked at Kenna. What did she take from your apartment? Kenna listed what she knew was missing, your laptop for sure. My jewelry box. She went through all our important papers, but I don't know what she took from those. Detective Rivera nodded. We'll need a full inventory when you get home. Check your credit cards and bank accounts immediately. He stood to leave, giving us his card. We're going to catch her. In the meantime, change all your locks and passwords. Just then, Luke Murphy from our building walked in, holding his phone up like he'd struck gold. Luke lived 2 doors down and had one of those video doorbells he was always showing off. He pushed past the detective and showed me his screen. A grainy video was playing. There she was, walking out of our building's front entrance, wearing my jacket and jeans, carrying 2 of our canvas shopping bags, stuffed full. The timestamp showed 45 minutes after Kenna's last text to me. Luke scrolled to another clip, her trying different keys at the mailbox bank in our lobby before giving up and leaving. The detective took Luke's phone, forwarding the videos to himself, asking about other cameras. Kenna squeezed my hand harder, watching the girl on screen, wearing my clothes like she owned them. The doctor came back to say I could leave, but needed to take it easy and watch for any delayed reactions. They gave me a set of scrubs to wear home, my clothes now evidence. Kenna helped me stand, my legs still wobbly. The ride back to our apartment felt like hours, even though it was only 20 minutes, both of us staring at every person on the sidewalk, wondering if they were connected. Our building's front door had new scratches around the lock. Inside, our apartment looked like a tornado had hit, drawers pulled out, papers scattered. The bedroom was the worst, our mattress flipped, the closet completely ransacked. Our small safe sat in the corner, scratch marks all around the dial where she tried to pry it open, but it had held. Kenna started picking things up, then stopped to take photos for insurance, while I called the locksmith Detective Rivera had recommended. The guy showed up within an hour, drilling out our old locks, explaining these new ones couldn't be picked or bumped. He changed the deadbolt and the doorknob, even added a chain lock for extra security, then checked the window locks. While he worked, we went through everything, trying to figure out what was missing. My laptop was gone, along with Kenna's jewelry box and both our passports from the filing cabinet. She'd taken our checkbook and a folder of tax documents that had our social security numbers. The locksmith finished, handing us 5 copies of the new keys. Give one to the building manager, he advised, but nobody else for now. Detective Rivera called while we were still cataloguing the damage to say they'd pulled the bar security footage and could see the whole interaction clearly. He needed me at the station tomorrow morning to look through photos of known associates, as Ashley rarely operated alone. That night, Neither of us could settle. Kenna got up every 10 minutes to check the locks and peer through the peephole. Every footstep in the hallway made us both freeze. A door slammed somewhere, and Kenna grabbed the baseball bat we'd pulled from the closet. We tried watching TV, but couldn't focus, ending up just lying there in the dark, listening to every creak and groan the building made. Around 3 a.m., a car alarm went off outside, and we both shot upright, hearts pounding. Sleep wasn't happening, so we made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, going through our credit card statements online. The next morning, I took an Uber to the police station, still too shaky to drive. The building smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. Detective Rivera met me and led me to a small room with a computer. He pulled up a database, showing me mugshots. The fifth photo made me stop. There she was, Ashley Marie Brennan. Same matted brown hair, but in this picture, her eyes looked dead and hollow. Her record showed arrests going back 3 years for theft and drug possession. The detective explained she usually worked with 2 or 3 others who fenced stolen goods through pawn shops and online marketplaces. They were checking every pawn shop in a 20-mile radius with our serial numbers. While I was at the station, my phone rang, my bank's fraud department. They detected suspicious charges at 3 different ATMs, all trying to withdraw the maximum amount, all at 2 a.m., miles apart. They were freezing my accounts and sending new cards overnight, but I needed to come in to sign paperwork. After the bank, I called my boss from the parking lot to explain why I hadn't shown up for 2 days. He listened to the whole story, then said he understood, but HR would need an official police report to approve any paid leave. Without that, I'd have to use my vacation days or take unpaid time. I told him I'd get the report from Detective Rivera and email it by the end of the day. Back at the apartment, Kenna had gotten a call from our credit card company about charges at an electronics store for $2,000 worth of gaming equipment. She'd already disputed them, and they said the charges would be reversed within 5 business days, but we needed to fill out fraud forms. Luke texted me more doorbell footage he'd found from 3 days before the attack, showing Ashley standing outside our building, watching people come and go. She'd been planning this for a while, studying our patterns. Detective Rivera called again to say they'd found some of our items at a pawn shop downtown where someone matching Ashley's description had sold them yesterday. The shop owner, Thiago Marston, claimed he didn't know the items were stolen, but they were checking his story. The credit card company called back an hour later to confirm all fraudulent charges had been reversed and our account was secure, though we'd need new cards and to update any automatic payments. Detective Rivera called that afternoon while I was still sorting through bank paperwork to tell me Thiago Marston from a pawn shop across town had contacted him about my laptop. Someone matching Ashley's description had tried to sell it yesterday afternoon, but got spooked when Thiago asked for ID and left without completing the sale. The detective wanted me to come down to the station to verify the serial number. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door when Kenna stopped me, demanding to know where I was going without telling her first. I explained about the pawn shop, but she started yelling that I should have asked her to come with me. The stress finally boiled over, and we had our first real fight about everything that had happened. She blamed me for being too trusting, for following some random girl into an abandoned building like an idiot. I snapped back that she was the one who actually let Ashley into our apartment, even after seeing the weird texts. We went back and forth for 20 minutes, both of us saying things we didn't really mean, until finally Kenna started crying, and I felt like the worst person alive. We sat on the couch in silence for a while before I apologized, and she did too. We agreed we were both just scared and taking it out on each other. The next day, Detective Rivera called with more news. They'd found medical waste records from a pharmacy near that abandoned building, showing someone had bought needles recently. The buyer paid cash, but the security camera caught them clearly, and it looked like Ashley with a man they were trying to identify. Our landlord showed up that afternoon to discuss the security upgrades we'd been demanding. He complained about the cost of new cameras and better locks, but eventually agreed to install them after I mentioned we might have to break our lease if he didn't. The work would start next week and include cameras at all entrances, plus new deadbolts on every apartment. Detective Rivera sent over the bar security footage for me to review. It clearly showed Ashley approaching me, the bartender confirming she'd been hanging around for hours before I arrived, nursing the same drink and watching everyone. The footage showed her waiting until I was alone, then making her move with that whole panic act. Watching it made me feel sick, seeing how calculated everything was. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. with my heart racing, my whole body shaking. I couldn't catch my breath and thought I was having a heart attack, but Kenna recognized it as a panic attack. It lasted about 10 minutes, me sitting on the bathroom floor trying to breathe normally while she rubbed my back. The next day, I called the hospital, and they said panic attacks and shaking episodes were common after being drugged like I was. They referred me to a counselor specializing in trauma who could see me next week. The attacks kept happening randomly over the next few days, sometimes triggered by nothing at all. Detective Rivera called with interesting news. Another victim had come forward. Maggie Buckner had seen a news story about our case and contacted him because Ashley had done the exact same thing to her 3 months ago. Same story about an overdosing friend, same abandoned building, same drug injection, same identity theft. Maggie was willing to testify, which would strengthen the case significantly. That evening, Kenna brought up the idea of moving somewhere Ashley didn't know about. I understood why she felt unsafe, but I didn't want to let Ashley drive us from our home. We talked about it for a long time, Kenna saying she couldn't sleep, knowing Ashley had been in our apartment. I promised to think about it, hoping the new security measures would be enough to make her feel safe again. The credit monitoring service called the next morning about someone trying to open a store credit account at a major retailer using my social security number. The fraud alert we'd placed caught it immediately, blocking the application, but it showed Ashley or whoever she was working with was still trying to use my information. I had to call the store's fraud department and go through the whole story again while they flagged my information. Detective Rivera had the best news yet when he called that afternoon about the pawn shop surveillance footage. The cameras had gotten a clear shot of Ashley's face when she tried to sell my laptop, but more importantly, she was with a man who was already in their database. He had multiple arrests for fencing stolen goods, and they were bringing him in for questioning. With 2 clear identifications and a known associate to pressure, the detective felt confident they were close to finding Ashley. The next morning, I went down to check our storage unit in the basement. I hadn't been there since before the attack. The lock was still on the door, but something felt wrong about its position. I opened it, and my stomach dropped at the mess inside. Our camping gear was gone, including the expensive tent we'd bought for our anniversary trip. The old laptop I kept for backup files was missing, along with a box of electronics we'd been meaning to sell. She must have gone through everything because boxes were opened and dumped everywhere. I took photos and called Detective Rivera, who said this was common with identity thieves looking for documents or things to sell. Back upstairs, my phone rang with my boss, asking when I'd be coming back to work. I'd been out for almost a week now, and while he understood, he needed to know my timeline. I told him I needed a few more days, but the truth was, I couldn't afford much more unpaid leave. My sick days were used up, and the bills kept coming whether I was working or not. The hospital called that afternoon with my final lab results, and the news made me feel sick all over again. The injection contained a mix of benzo and something called GHB that could have easily killed me at that dose. The doctor said most people wouldn't have been able to walk out of that building on their own. She was amazed I'd managed to get to the street and find help, considering what was in my system. Detective Rivera called with an update about finding where Ashley had been staying. They'd located an encampment under the highway where other homeless people knew her as Haley. Everyone there said she'd been acting desperate lately, more aggressive than usual, and talking about needing money fast. The detective thought she might owe someone dangerous, which would explain the escalation in her crimes. That night, Kenna and I had a long talk about what to do next. She still wanted to move, but I didn't want to run from our own home. We decided to stay, but install our own security system on top of what the landlord was doing. We ordered cameras for inside the apartment and a doorbell camera that would alert our phones if anyone approached. The next day, Detective Rivera called about something concerning. A rideshare driver had come forward after seeing Ashley's photo on the news. He remembered dropping someone matching her description near Kenna's workplace last week, before any of this started. Now we had to worry she'd been stalking us, planning this whole thing for who knows how long. Kenna wanted to take time off work, but couldn't afford it either. That evening, we got into our first real fight about Ashley and what drove her to this. Kenna saw her as just a criminal who chose to hurt people for money. I kept thinking about the desperation in those camps and wondered if the system had failed her first. We went to bed angry at each other for the first time since this started. The next morning, I woke up to text messages from 3 different unknown numbers. One mentioned my mother's maiden name, which was in our documents. Another referenced the name of my first pet, which I'd used as a security question for various accounts. The third asked if I still lived at our old address from 2 years ago. Detective Rivera said to screenshot everything and change all my security questions immediately. He explained Ashley probably sold our information to other criminals who are now fishing for more details. The detective also told me they'd set up surveillance at the pawn shop since Ashley seemed to return there regularly to sell stolen goods. They had undercover officers rotating shifts, hoping to catch her during another sale attempt. He felt confident they'd get her soon since she was running out of places to fence stolen items. Later that day, he called again with good news about strengthening the case. He'd shown Maggie the same photo lineup I'd looked at, and she'd identified Ashley immediately. Having two victims who could testify would make the charges much more serious, showing a pattern of behavior rather than a single incident. Maggie also remembered additional details about her attack that matched mine perfectly, including the exact words Ashley used about her friend overdosing. The similarities were too specific to be coincidence, proving Ashley had done this multiple times before. I spent the rest of the day trying to focus on work emails from home, but kept jumping every time my phone buzzed. Kenna texted that she'd seen someone who looked like Ashley near her building's parking garage, but security said it was just another homeless woman asking for change. We were both so paranoid now that every thin woman with brown hair made our hearts race. The security system installation couldn't happen fast enough, and I found myself checking the locks constantly, even though we'd already changed them. That night, neither of us slept well despite the new deadbolt and chair wedged under the doorknob. Every noise from the hallway made us freeze and listen, wondering if she'd somehow gotten into the building again. The detective had assured us she was probably laying low now that her photo was everywhere, but that didn't stop the anxiety. I kept thinking about those text messages and wondering how many other criminals now had our information floating around. The next morning, Detective Rivera called, and I told him straight up that I wasn't going to just sit around being a victim while they handled everything. He actually seemed to respect that and said he'd keep me in the loop as much as he could legally share. 2 days later, he called back with some background on Ashley that made things make more sense. She'd been in a treatment program 6 months ago, run by a social worker named Bonnie Welsh, who said Ashley had shown real promise before leaving early and disappearing. Bonnie explained Ashley had been clean for almost 3 months in the program and was working on getting her life together when something triggered a relapse, and she took off. The detective thought knowing this might help us understand what we were dealing with, even if it didn't excuse what she'd done to us. I spent the whole next morning at our dining table, sorting through every single document we owned, trying to get everything organized for the bank, credit agencies, and insurance companies. Birth certificates, social security cards, tax returns, bank statements, all spread out in neat piles while I made lists of what needed to be reported where. My hand cramped from filling out fraud affidavit forms, identity theft reports, and credit freeze requests. Kenna brought me coffee and sandwiches while I worked through lunch, making phone calls to every company that might have our information on file. By 3 p.m., I had a stack of certified mail envelopes ready to send, and my brain felt like mush from dealing with automated phone systems and hold music. Detective Rivera called that afternoon about the pawn shop surveillance they'd set up after Thiago reported Ashley had been there multiple times. They had undercover officers watching the place and were ready to grab her the next time she showed up. The next morning, around 11 a.m., the detective called again, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. Ashley had walked right up to the pawn shop door, but must have sensed something was off because she turned around at the last second and disappeared into the crowd before the officers could react. They'd been so close, and now she was spooked and probably wouldn't go back there again. Meanwhile, the locksmith finished installing our new deadbolts, and the security company got all our cameras up and running. We had cameras covering the front door, hallway, living room, and even one in the bedroom that we could check from our phones. The apartment felt like a prison with all the new locks and cameras, but at least we could sleep without jumping at every sound. I called my boss that afternoon to talk about coming back to work and explained I was still dealing with panic attacks and couldn't focus properly yet. He was more understanding than I expected and offered to let me work from home 3 days a week until I felt ready to come back to the office full-time. It was a huge relief knowing I wouldn't lose my job on top of everything else. 3 days later, I was working on my laptop at home when Detective Rivera called with the news we'd been waiting for. Ashley had been arrested trying to shoplift from a pharmacy across town, and the responding officer recognized her from the bulletin that had been sent to all units. She was finally in custody, and they were processing her at the station. The detective said they'd recovered some of our stuff from the backpack she had when they arrested her, including Kenna's grandmother's necklace and my college ring, though most of our electronics had already been sold. They also found syringes in her bag that matched the type of medical waste she'd purchased from that pharmacy near the abandoned building. During questioning with her public defender present, Ashley admitted to drugging and robbing me and breaking into our apartment, but claimed someone else had planned the whole thing and forced her to do it. The detective said she was clearly going through withdrawal in the holding cell and kept changing her story about who this other person was and how they'd made her do it. Her lawyer was trying to argue she wasn't competent to be questioned in her current state, but the prosecutor said they had enough evidence either way. 2 weeks after her arrest, I got a call from the bank saying they were officially closing the fraud investigation in our favor. Every penny that had been stolen had been returned to our account, and they'd removed all the fraud markers from our credit report. The woman on the phone said we shouldn't see any long-term effects on our credit score, and they'd put extra monitoring on our accounts for the next 2 years, just to be safe. It felt like we could finally start to breathe again, knowing the financial part was resolved, even though the criminal case was still moving forward. 3 days later, I sat in the doctor's office while he went through my blood test results page by page. Everything came back normal, and he said the drugs were completely out of my system with no lasting damage to my liver or kidneys. The counselor I'd been seeing twice a week helped me work through the panic attacks without making me feel weak for having them. She taught me breathing exercises and grounding techniques that actually worked when I felt that tight feeling in my chest. Detective Rivera called while I was leaving the counselor's office to tell me Ashley's public defender was pushing for a plea deal. Instead of prison time, she'd go into a court-ordered treatment program for 18 months with regular drug tests and check-ins. The detective wanted to know if Kenna and I were okay with that arrangement, since we were the victims. I told him I'd talk to Kenna and get back to him. That night, Kenna and I sat on the couch for 3 hours, talking about everything that had happened. We agreed we needed better communication and decided to start seeing a couples counselor together. We also set up weekly check-ins where we'd talk about how we were really feeling instead of pretending everything was fine. The counselor we found specialized in trauma and helped us understand how this whole thing had affected us differently. Kenna felt violated that someone had been in our home, while I kept replaying that night in the abandoned building. For weeks passed, and our apartment started feeling normal again. We'd bought new throw pillows and moved the furniture around, and the security cameras just became part of the background. The new locks were solid, and we both had copies of all the keys. I stopped checking the cameras obsessively, and Kenna stopped jumping when someone knocked on the door. The credit monitoring company sent their final report showing everything was back to normal. They'd set us up with fraud alerts for the next 2 years and would notify us immediately if anyone tried to use our information. We were more careful about shredding documents and not posting too much on social media, but we weren't living in fear anymore. Detective Rivera called on a Tuesday afternoon to update us on Ashley's case. She'd accepted the treatment program deal and would be monitored by the court for the full 18 months. She had to pay us back for everything she'd stolen, though it would come in small monthly payments since she didn't have much. The important thing was she had to stay at least 500 feet away from us and our home. That Friday night, Kenna and I made pasta together in the kitchen, just like we used to before all this happened. We were chopping vegetables, and she accidentally squirted tomato juice on my shirt, and we both started laughing. Later, we watched some dumb reality show on the couch, and I realized it was the first completely normal evening we'd had in over 2 months. No talking about the case or checking locks or looking over our shoulders, just us being us again. Sitting there, Kenna's head resting on my shoulder, a profound sense of peace settled over me for the first time in months. I thought about Ashley, now in that treatment center. The white-hot anger that had consumed me for weeks had finally faded, replaced by something far more complex. She was sick, desperate, and she had done a truly terrible thing. But maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to finally get the help she so clearly needed. We were going to be okay. And in a strange way, I found myself hoping, truly hoping, that she would be too, someday. It's hard to rebuild trust after something like this, both in the world and, sometimes, in yourself. So tell me, in the comments below, if you had been in my shoes, at that bar, facing that plea for help, would you have followed her?